MNN, in partnership with League of Women Voters of the City of New York, presents Race to Represent, multimedia coverage of Manhattan elections, Council District 10 debate.
The League of Women Voters of the City of New York and the Manhattan Neighborhood Network are pleased to bring you one of the candidates running in the Democratic primary on September 10th in Council District 10. The winner will be the Democratic nominee for that seat in the November election. I'm Valerie Warner, and I'm with the League of Women Voters. All the candidates will be running in the new council districts that were drawn by the New York City Redistricting Commission following the results of the 2010 census, and each district represents approximately 168,000 residents. Idanis Rodriguez, the incumbent in the current District 10, was unable to join us today. But you will have the opportunity to meet Cheryl Pam, who will be on the ballot on September 10th. Welcome.
Thank you.
Ms. Pam, I'd like to ask you some questions about some of the major issues facing your district and the city as a whole. Just to start out, let's talk about affordable housing. It's really rare in Manhattan. What do you think the City Council can do to preserve and expand the number of affordable housing units?
The City Council has to be willing to explore how to fund affordable housing. We can't just rely on the mayor and the mayor's commissioners to decide how many units of affordable housing we'll fund. We can't rely on the New York City Economic Development Corporation to decide how many units of affordable housing we will fund. The City Council has to take a more active role in coming up with ways to fund affordable units that are actually accessible to the people who live in the districts that they represent.
Thank you. The Democratic candidates for mayor have proposed modifying mayoral control of the schools. What changes, if any, would you like to see? Do you have a position on putting charter schools in the same building with traditional public schools?
That has been a disaster for traditional public schools. It's cut down resources, it's cut down space, and it's not fair. It's something that's happened without real engagement of the community to find out if this is what was truly desired. And it's almost as if charter school operators were given privileges that public school principals didn't have. So, you know, it hasn't been good for the community. This is a city where it's very difficult to build schools. And, you know, after more than a decade of litigation, we don't have that many new school facilities in northern Manhattan. So.
Are there any other changes in the school system that you'd like to see that the council can affect?
Well, one thing that has happened since the Campaign for Fiscal Equity litigation was finished and the governor and the mayor agreed to fund increases in public education is that the mayor really cut back a lot of what he committed as part of his share of the agreement, and we never got what we were owed by the state. And we did get money for construction and renovation, but it feels like it just disappeared without a trace. So I think the council should probably take a much more active role in looking at what we're doing with our capital budget and education, and really focusing more on ways to come up with funding for education. I just feel that education is not as much of a priority, even though we spend a lot of time talking about, you know, how important it is and how important it is for our economic future. The resources just aren't there, even, you know, after more than a decade of litigation. So I think the council as a body has to be more committed to taking on a leadership role instead of just negotiating at the margins for small things like after-school programs.
Okay. Another important topic right now in the city, there may be a change in the stop and frisk policy. What else would you do to make our streets and neighborhoods safer?
Well, I think at the neighborhood level, working very closely with the precinct leaders and the community members who work with the police precincts to come up with ways to monitor what's going on our streets. We have a lot of muggings, we have a lot of car break-ins, and these aren't real priorities for the police department. We have a lot of theft of like iPhones and iPads and things like that. And then we have had rapes, and so there's a kind of fear in northern Manhattan that things are turning around. Some people really come to me on the campaign trail and tell me how they don't feel safe in the parks. And so I think at the neighborhood level, engaging people more on how to be safe and pushing for more of a presence on the street of officers is where we have to go.
Okay. On another topic, the City Council receives approximately $50 million in discretionary and member item funding for the 51 districts. What is your position on how this funding is allocated and who determines how the money should be used?
I think we have to have a change on the council and how the leadership can control and discipline council members. I think with discretionary funding, we should move as much as possible in the direction of participatory budgeting and letting constituents decide what the priorities are. And that process itself isn't perfect. I mean, how do you get every single person voting? But there's so many pluses to it. People engage each other in ways that they might not have done otherwise, and they learn more about each other. I think it does bring people closer together on a neighborhood level. So those are the strengths. It also might make us more accountable, for what we do with our public funds. So I think that's what should happen with discretionary funding.
Okay. Do you have any strong idea about what your future constituents want you to work on first, should you win the election?
Well, housing is such a pressing need in our community. It's a perennial need. Whoever is in office at any level, state, federal, or city, they are always flooded with complaints about the condition of housing and people not being able to get Section 8 and people wanting to get into a New York City Housing Authority buildings and they can't. So housing is just, one of those issues that's never going to go away in northern Manhattan unless we build more affordable housing. Jobs. Really, more people have asked me about jobs and how can they get jobs in our community than have complained about housing. So how we create jobs and how we use our public funds for training and workforce development, those are going to be big issues in our district.
There's another big topic coming up very soon. What can the City Council do to pave the way for the new federal health care initiative, which will go into effect in 2014?
Well, one thing the City Council can do is host each member can host in his or her district forums where people can get information. There are lots of good not-for-profit organizations in New York City that can help coordinate these forums and teach people where to go, how to buy insurance over the exchange, and they can help small businesses get insurance for their employees. So I think one of the best roles that the council can play is looking at how to bring the information to the community so that they can access the benefits. But also, the council is representing people on the ground in neighborhoods, so it's going to see, the council members will see firsthand what it's like to be a small business and try to get insurance for your employees under the new law. And they'll have some information for the federal government on how this thing is working. So.
Okay. Council members recommend half the members of the community boards in their districts. Do you have any criteria for that kind of appointment, and how would you use the board's recommendations, particularly on land use?
I like the changes that our current borough president, Scott Stringer, put in place for selecting community boards. I think looking at people's backgrounds and experiences is a good way to get just the right mix of people on the community board. And as far as community board resolutions on land use, community boards really, they really do represent what people in our neighborhoods want. And sometimes it's just not possible to do what community boards want on land use. Sometimes landlords have more rights, you know. But yes, I would definitely try to work with the boards and implement their recommendations, because they're usually, you know, close to what people want and what people are asking for.
On another topic entirely, the infrastructure. The infrastructure in the city has been deteriorating for years, and we've suffered with broken water mains, potholes, major bridge repairs. How will you get the financial resources to bring our city into the 21st century?
Well, you have to tax, you have to borrow. So, you know, you can go beg for federal money. You know, I would do all those things. I think infrastructure is critical. I don't like that we are releasing so much untreated sewage into the Hudson, and you know, I'd like to see something done about that. And we do have sewage treatment facilities uptown. I'd like to see the Hudson become more of a recreational resource, especially in northern Manhattan, and we can't if we're dumping raw sewage in it. So we do have to modernize our infrastructure, but I think the first thing we have to do is start talking about the infrastructure that we don't see but we need in the city for people to start prioritizing it.
Well, you mentioned the water supply. Currently, the law would allow the city's wastewater treatment plants to accept waste from hydrofracking operations elsewhere. So such waste is, pardon me? It would let us accept waste from fracking operations that were being done elsewhere. And that waste is toxic and hazardous, and it poses a threat to our water supply. So as several New York counties have this waste legislation pending protecting their water supplies, would you introduce and support legislation giving New York City that same kind of protection?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Is that state law? It's under state law? I'm sorry, I didn't know. It's state law that would permit New York City. No, it's an awful idea.
Okay, while we're talking about waste, do you have any position on the proposed reopening of the East 91st Street waste transfer station?
I like the concept of each community being responsible for processing its own waste. And so that kind of puts me at odds with the residents there. You know, maybe there's somewhere else on the east side it can go.
Well, do you have any other thoughts on how the city should remove its garbage other than the way they're doing it now?
You know, that is an area that we need to just, you know, explore and discuss, because we could be using our waste for better purposes. We don't have to be, you know, putting it in landfills in other states. We need to be looking at what other governments are doing with their waste in terms of, you know, energy production and, you know.
Will you support the winner of the primary on September 10th?
Will I support the winner? If it's me.
Yes or no?
if I'm the winner, of course. You know, the winner is the winner.
Okay.
You know, we have to work together. We share the same community, and, you know, of course, Councilman Rodriguez and I did sit down and talk about this race, and you know, I told him I'd be running against him. I didn't like what he was doing with redistricting, and that we just disagreed right now, and that after it was all said and done, we'd be working together for the community.
Okay, well, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and why don't I be happy to have you make your closing remarks?
Okay, well, I am Cheryl Pam. I'm running in Council District 10. I'd be honored to represent Northern Manhattan. I'm offering voters a choice. I think choice and competition is important in democratic elections, and you know, I hope I can get your support on September 10th.
Okay, well, it's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you for coming in. And voters, for more information about voting, the candidates, your poll site, contact the League of Women Voters of New York City at www.lwvnyc.org. That's vote411.org, or call 212-725-3541. And remember, only registered voters enrolled in the political party having a primary election may vote on September 10th. All registered voters, regardless of party, vote in the general election on November 5th. Thank you.